I say by first wishing everyone a thanks to Hashem, not just because it's Thanksgiving here in America, but because we have to give thanks to the Eibishter for being here together, another day, another opportunity. And we'll finish today the first section of this letter in Mana Chochem on page Kuf Dalid, where Rabbi Yoel is concluding his refutation on the topic of li'umiyut, nationalism, and the attack, the accusation of the Satmar who complained to Lubavitchers that Lubavitch and the Rebbe are basically leaning towards nationalism and Zionism, and that argument. And Rabbi Yoel took it apart, and he asked the accuser to please be thoughtful, objective, and think about what you're saying. And he showed with seichel, with logic, that Chabad, that Lubavitch, is even greater antagonist to Zionism than Satmar. And he explained that in the letter. I'm not going to repeat it because it's phenomenal and very important. So to accuse Lubavitch of being Zionist and holding and of nationalism is simply ludicrous. That's part of what we learned until today. Now let's go to page Kuf Dalid, and we're on the second paragraph. Ukeis avakesh es kveit teiroscha. And now I will request of the Honorable Torah personality, referring to the individual with great respect, sheyichya, may you live, sheyizboinen ktsas unarein tiefen sich. Sheyizboinen ktsas means meditate a little bit, reflect a bit, and then in Yiddish he says unarein tiefen sich. Tief in Yiddish, tief is a Yiddish word. Arein tiefen means go deeply into it. Tief means deep. Arein tiefen sich means get deep into it. Und arein tiefen sich, alibe de emes, according to the truth, und aropnemen alle negiois, and remove all personal agendas. Rak lehizbeinen alibe de emes. Please, he says, think about what I'm writing truthfully. Put aside all personal agendas. And then he says, what type of education wages war against the shita of nationalism? Hachinuch shel Satmar, is it the chinuch of Satmar? Shemimenu mistayev hashkofa bedakos al kaponim. From that shita, from the Satmar shita, there derives in a kind of in a sensitive, not in a sensitive way, in a way based on the Ashkafa, what will follow, although it's not obvious. She'inyin shehayadus hu davar shemishtanem medoy ledoir. The following. Listen to this chavra. That Yiddishkeit changes from generation to generation. Why? Because according to their argument, to begin with, the idea of Jewishness, as he explained earlier, so I'm not going to go and rehash his entire logic, but he explained at length earlier that this shita concludes and that Yiddishkeit is a davar chitzoni, is an external thing. Really, all Yidden are like all Goyim, all non-Jews. And therefore, Rabbi Yoel says, if that's your attitude, then it's just a matter of time before it's going to fall aside. Now, this is a very, very heavy, you could say, accusation that Rabbi Yoel is casting on the Satmar Shita, but that's what it says, whether we agree or disagree, and it's open for conversation. We'll go on. Oi, hachinuch shel Lubavitch she'omer she'ahevdil ben Yisrael la'amim hu be'etzem uhusam, or by looking at the education of Lubavitch, of Chabad, of a Lubavitch person who identifies with Lubavitch, which says that the difference between a Jew and Goyim is in the very core. Now I know, you see, if you haven't learned the letter until now, this paragraph is outrageous. So the paragraph on its own it makes no sense. But you have to have learned what he said until now to appreciate what he's saying here. So I'm going to go on because I just can't repeat it again. Ve'im yishal oisi, and he writes, if you will ask me, im kol ma shekosafti le'el hu nochin, if everything that I've written before is correct, and that is, in the parentheses, Lubavitch lechemes neged Zionism harbe yosem asher Satmar. I just mentioned that to you in the open monologue, that Lubavitch fights against Zionism much greater than Satmar does. Lama cheshvim beWilliamsburg shebelubavitch matifet Zionis rachmana litzlan. If that's the case, why is that in Williamsburg, remember, this was an attack coming from Williamsburg. Why is it that in Williamsburg they believe that Lubavitch smells of Zionism? God forbid. Ashiv l'chor. Rabbi Yoel says, I will respond, I will answer you. She'ein zakush yiklal. This isn't a question at all. V'kvar hoyloi lomi. He says, this was already so in history. Let's go back in history. And he says, there was this group called the Frankists, and they were basically, heretical and false, and the Baal Shem Tov fought against them. The shita, the ideology of the Frankists, was similar to the shita of the Shabtai Tzvi. V'aval became. And nevertheless, Amru ala Baal Shem Tov, they said about the Baal Shem Tov, Shehu Shayach Lekat Shatz Rachman Litzlan, that the Baal Shem Tov, with his shita of Hasidism, it rings and he belongs and associates to the group, the cult of Shabtai Tzvi, God forbid. Shitas Balatani, Shitas Chabad, the shita of the Alter Rebbe of Chabad, he betachlis hanigod l'shitas Spinoza philosoph kaifer yedua lahavdil. The shita of the Alter Rebbe, where he talks about every yid having a nefesh elikis. So some argue, hey, that sounds like Spinoza's argument. If you understand Chassidus, well, you know it's the total opposite of what Spinoza said. Spinoza said the bench is God. What the Alter Rebbe is teaching is that the bench has godliness. The bench is not God. There's nothing that is here in the world that is God. God transcends that concept. This is God. That's the opposite of the transcendental God, which we call in Hebrew Atzmus. So what does the Alter Rebbe mean? And Yonason will tell you, as a long-time student of Chabad Chassidus, that there is nefesh hashenis b'Yisrael chelik elekabi mal mamish. Chapter 2 in Tanya means there is godliness, a godly force that's within Gashmi. So Rabbi Yoel writes back to the letter that the shita of Chabad is the ultimate opposition, betachlis hanigud l'shitas Spinoza, to the shita of Spinoza, philosoph, Kaifer, a known heretical philosopher, Yadua lahavdil, v'ahu became. And nevertheless, there were many people, she'omral, shitas Chabad, they said about the shita of Chabad, of the Balatanya, she'kemoy shita Spinoza rachman litzlan. They accused the Alter Rebbe of being a follower of Spinoza, God forbid. Umadua. Why? Chabad explains at great length in its Chassidus how the entire existence of the universe, it is only possible through the godly energy that creates and sustains the world tamid constantly, me'ayin liyesh ex nilo, from something, from nothing to something. Uveteres Chabad yesh haloshen, and in Chabad terminology there is this term, quote, Sheha'elam hu halikus, the world is godliness. Rabbi Yoel writes, look into Spinoza's writing, and you'll see that he says a similar language. Spinoza does, Yamach Shemam. Elamai. What's the difference? Spinoza Omar Sha'olam Kayim Yatzmai. Spinoza says the world exists on its own independently. And what does Spinoza mean? That the world is godliness. That the world itself is godliness. Rabbi Yoel says, Spinoza's argument is mamish heresy. He says you don't need a godly energy to create the world constantly. Why? Because the world is God. So, Isser, if the world is God, why do you need a force? What do you need an energy? What do you need a yesh mi'ayin? You have God. So Rabbi Yoel says it's the total opposite of Chabad, of Yiddishkeit, of basic Judaism, that the world independent of God is nothing. Spinoza says it's everything. So Rabbi Yoel says that Spinoza, saying that Chabad is Spinoza, is you simply don't know the facts, and you're totally wrong. He says he's still saying that in Spinoza argues that the world itself, the world itself, hu'alika is God. Top of the next page, kuf hey. Chas v'sholom, God forbid. Comes B'teiras Chabad. What's the shita of Chabad? B'teiras Chabad emeres lehepech mamash. Chabad says just the opposite. Sha'elam ein leishum kiyum klal ukal mitzadatzmai. The world Avram has no existence at all. Nothing. That's why the world constantly needs God's energy, that should create it every moment. If you take away one moment from God, the Creator, being in the creation and giving it and making and creating it now, means every moment, the world, there's no world. You wake up in the morning, you don't wake up because the world is not here for you to wake up in. Right? Avo kishalei reitzim lilmed bifnim. Biponim. The Rabbi Yoel says, but when you don't want to study something with its face, meaning and its pneumius, you don't want to really dissect. You don't have the time, you don't have the energy, you don't have the interest, you don't have the knowledge. And you just look at the word and you find that in Chabad Hasidus, and you find it lahavdil in Spinoza. You say Chabad and Spinoza are one and the same. Ha'olam u'alikus. But what Spinoza means by ha'olam u'alikus, and what Chabad means by ha'olam u'alikus, is rochoik mimizrach l'mayach. It's as distant from the east to the west. Shenimtza harbe b'sifri Chabad amru shushita Spinoza. So since these words ha'olam hu elikus, which is found throughout Chabad Hasidus, so therefore there were those who accused Chabad of following Spinoza's heretical view. So Rabbi Yoel says, basically, before we continue, he says, you're telling me that since I've explained to you so well how Chabad is as far as as far from Zionism as could be. And even more, the Satmar is far from Zionism. Right? Nevertheless, walk in the streets of Williamsburg and you'll hear them call Lubavitchers and the Rebbe the biggest Zionists, etc., etc. So Rabbi Yoel says, hey, my friends, let's go look back in history. It was the same thing with the Baal Shem Tov, and it was the same thing with the Alter Rebbe, and the same thing with many other tzaddikim, where they were accused and attacked. I don't want to go into now the deal, but Reb Nachman of Breslev and his issues, and on and on. The Chayzel of Lublin. And until today, there are writers in your holy country of Eretz Yisrael that have written extensive academic works against the tzaddikim and basically trying to show that they're not holy and the ba-ba-ba and they're, and everything else. I'm sure you're familiar with this, and if not, you don't need to know. So the fact that the street speaks negatively about a group or individual, so what? Imagine someone will say Isser is not a good yid, and they're bad mouthing for no reason at all. What could you do? And that's the way the world is. If someone wants to badmouth you and lie about you and say that your philosophy hinges on heresy, no one can stop. It's a free world. It was a free world during the time of the Baal Shem Tov, a free world at the time of the Alter Rebbe, and a free world today. So Rabbi Yoel's response to the person, he says, is the fact that they speak this way in Williamsburg doesn't make it right. It just means that they're, excuse the expression, he doesn't say it, idiots. And idiots in the sense they don't take the time. And again, I'm not talking about, he says Williamsburg, doesn't mean everybody. He means those people that don't take the time to think, and don't take the time to discern, and don't take the time to really be open and honest and remove yourself to see that it's two different worlds. So then you're just, it's like saying, oh, Spinoza says the world is God, Olam hu elikus, and the Balatanya says Olam hu elikus. Oh, it's the same, right? And you should know this Nakuda is a very important Nakuda lesson for us in our lives. What's the expression in English? Not everything you see is the way it is. Sometimes you hear something, you see something, and itaka could be that way, and you have to be careful. And sometimes it's not that way. It's not that way. Because if you study it more, you'll understand that it's something completely different. Okay, let's continue. Rabbi Yoel says the same similarity is in our situation today. He says in Yiddish, when one grabs, literally means grabs, it means when one decides, unor in a word, when someone just grabs a word, he picks out a word, a saying, a teaching. Mashal Lubavitcher Medis. He says, you Lubavitchers, you say, Shagam Poisha Yisrael, even sinners amongst Yisrael, Yidden, Jews, Hein Yehudim, are Jewish. So Rabbi Yoel writes first in the parentheses, Shebe'emes ein ze vort shel Lubavitch. This is not a creation of Lubavitch. Ki im u'maymer Chazal b'Masechta Sanhedrin, as we quoted before. It's a Maimer Chazal, Ava P'Shechota Yisraelu. It's a Chazal in Masechta Sanhedrin. So what do you mean, Lubavitch created this saying? No, it's a Gemara, a Meferish Gemara. But V'chol HaSvarim Meleim b'zeh. And from the Gemara on, all Svarim talk about this. Rambam causes al halochinal, and we said earlier, the Rambam actually uses this as an actual psak, a law. So the Williamsburgers, they say this idea of saying that all sinners are Jewish is the same shita as Zionism. The truth is The Chabad shita is just the opposite of Zionism. Satmar, even more so than Satmar, Canal, as we said and wrote earlier. And just as we explained all of this regarding this particular area, Velvel, called nationalism within Zionism, remember? Because now he's going to continue in the next few chapters talking about other aspects of Zionism. He tackled what we call, again, liyumiyut. Look at the top of your page in the heading, and it says mana chochem, in the middle it says igeres beis, inyan haliyumiyut, the particular area in which he concludes, and he wrote until now, his refutation is about the idea of nationalism. So let's go back to the text. Just as it applies to nationalism within Zionism, the same exact things regarding the second aspect of Zionism. And that is, Yonason, the idea of Zionism's view of Geula, redemption. Rabbi Yoel says, as he prepares us for the next upcoming chapter, he says the primary milchama of Lubavitch against Zionism was dafke on this issue that the Geula started, which we spoke a little bit about, aschalta the Geula. So that's what he's going to tackle now in the next section, the view of Lubavitch on Ischalta the Geula, that it's not Ischalta the Geula. So that's what he says. Shika Muhammad who dafke shitas Lubavitch. Rabbi Yoel again says, dafke the shita of Lubavitch, not the shita of Satmar, opposes completely Ischalta the Geula, Kidulakama. So Chevra, what you see over here, Rabbi Yoel's approach, and we'll conclude with this today, you see that what he's out to show is not only that Lubavitch opposes the various ideologies of Zionism, but it opposes it even greater than Satmar. So he's turning the table over. He says, you guys oppose Zionists. He says, really, according to your shita, in a sense, you have something in common with Zionists. I mean, this is, if you think, if you have the knowledge and understanding, background-wise, and you think about what he's writing, it's phenomenal. It's outrageous and phenomenal, but it's true. I think it's true, and everyone should decide. But that's where he's getting at, and that's why those that have taken the time to study this letter, to read it, and also to study it, and like he says, Isser, not to unchap and avert, not just to grab one word, open up, right? Isser, wake up. Isser, this applies to you. That your friend, you gave him the sefer, he opened up, he saw one word, he closed it, and he spit. That's exactly what Rabbi Yoel says. That's like saying Lubavitch and the Alter Rebbe are students of Spinoza. It's the exact same thing. And you should show him this last paragraph where he says that. This idea, don't chapa an avert. Read the whole thing cover to cover with all the references. I always tell my chevra in my books, Velvel has some of my books, you want to find the real salt and pepper and energy in my book, you got to read the footnotes. My footnotes, generally speaking, are not just, a reference. There's so much there that I don't want to put in the text, and it's in there. In other words, so what I'm saying is a smart reader doesn't just read the text, he reads the footnotes too. And everyone knows that a good book must have a bibliography, you know what I'm saying? Because there's scholarship there. And if you really want to understand, couch potato reading, you lay down, you start reading the book. I saw that. What? You have no idea what you read, you don't know what it says. Okay. Yeah, story time. It's story time. It's past time now, Issa, what were you saying? And we finished. What were you saying?
He's going to read the whole thing.
No, you told me. But I make sure when you get around to it, if he comes back to discuss it with you, to point out that in other words, this is not to showing you wrong. That's not the point. as a Talmud Chacham, which you said he is, and a speaker and a teacher, in general, you never, poo-poo a sefer. That's, yeah, if you're Rabbi Soloveitchik and and such a genius, and so Rabbi Soloveitchik, when he would come into a house sometimes, and we see a certain sefer in the shelf that he considered ridiculous, he would say, "What are you doing with that here?" But that's a Soloveitchik. That's a genius. That's, it's a master. But us regular people, and most teachers, and probably including him, if I may say so, are not on that level where, we should, throw out the baby with the water right away. Yes, Zionism.
When you say that the Geula, when the Zionists say that Israel is the Geula is supposed to be shita, no more trouble from the grave, and Hashem consciously reminds us in a very not nice way that the grave was still giving us trouble every day. So what happened yesterday, that Macher that got killed by the infestation, every day something's happening, and they don't care. They just don't care, We don't have the rest from the grave. The grave continues to give us trouble. It's not the Geula. It's not. Wake up.
You're talking, I think, to the choir here. We're on the same page. I don't think anyone disagrees. At the same time, it says in Tanakh, "Machrivayich harisayich v'meitzi yitzeu." The Navi already said it 2,000 years ago. The biggest problems come from within ourselves. That's it. Of course, we have. Anyway, just this morning, I sent a message to my son-in-law and daughter. They should get a guard. My daughter runs a gan in Tel Aviv, and my son has a shul. I said, get the best security. I'm being I'm doing, I could say it. They have to do it. Someone has to pay for it. But the point is, okay, 100%, Yonason. But, I don't know. I have a feeling that if we Yidden would have more Avos Yisrael really between ourselves, and we can live with love and yet disagree. No one says you have to follow the same shita. That's not Jewish. That's not Torah. But respect, real respect, And if we would live that way, every one of us, and another one, I think there would be a lot less of all these things happening. And I'm not coming like, a prophet or a Sephardic Chacham. It wasn't the Rebbe's way.
There's a word like Kriyas Yamsuf that the Shvatim all went through their each path, but the walls were made of glass so that we could see each other and realize that his path is just as valid for him as mine is for me, and we can all see each other and respect each other.
That's a great.
It's a word Kriyas Yamsuf.
I never heard it. Thank you. Beautiful word. That's a beautiful word. That's a good. Yeah. So what I'm saying is, of course, there's no geula when we have bombings. Rahman litzlan, innocent young man, a teenager. It's mavel al arayin. And I've been at that bus stop. Probably you guys too. I've been there. I know exactly where that is. You know where it is. It's a lot of buses and a lot of people, and the highways, and people are going and coming. And then on the entrance to Givat Shol, there was another bomb, and now they started with new shtick. They're not even there. They do it remote control. You know that. And Israel says it looks like it's a new type, a new style, which is much more scary. I don't know. If you could be over there and just hit it this and it explodes. That's why they're always right. What's it called? Chayfetz Chashud. Chayfetz Chashud, right?
I see.
Chafetz Chashud.
What? They're getting help from Iran. They're getting help from Iran.
Of course.
Whatever.
Of course. So that we have the enemies, like Yonason said, Mashiach is still not here. So of course, how could you say it's chal to the Geula? But Yonason, the Eschalta, the Geula that the Zionists argued was that we have a state, we have our own country. And Rabbi Yoel is going to, he finished addressing the nationalism point, and now he's going to go to the Geula point. So we'll see everyone with Hashem on Monday, and I wish everyone a good Chodesh. Today's Chodesh, tomorrow's Chodesh. 39 years ago, tonight, my wife and I engaged. This was our day. We could have gotten engaged early. I told my wife, since the Rebbe, the first time he came home after 5 weeks, he had a severe heart attack on Shmini Atzeres 1977. So Rosh Chodesh Kislev, 5 weeks later, was the first time he left 770. And by Chassidim, this was such a big simcha for us. We were dancing and singing and Selah Chaim for 7 days. It was Shibbos Yemei HaMishta. So I said to my wife, I'd like to, write to the bracha that we want to engage and to get a bracha. And Taket came out, the answer from the Rebbe, it came out that the Rebbe blessed us and blessed the Shidduch on Rosh Chodesh Kislev. So it's a very auspicious day, not just personally, thank you, not just personally, but for Klal Yisrael, even though the Rebbe has passed on and all that, but the Nekuda, the message from every day that a tzaddik gave the world is to be celebrated. It doesn't mean you have to not go to yeshiva and close your business. I'm not saying that. But take a few moments to reflect on this, and of course those of us that witnessed it, and I think Yonason was already in Morristown. It was you can't imagine the bottles of vodka were flying empty. It was, the Rebbe was close to death. He had a Dr. Weiss from Chicago. He said he didn't know how his heart. He checked the heart 5 hours or so after he flew in, and he checked it, and he didn't know how it didn't make more damage, and that he survived. So Hashem wanted him, and it was well for 15 more years, from 1977 to 1992, when he had his debilitating stroke, which ultimately led to his passing in 94. So I can tell you that those 15 years is when the Shlichus movement went into high gear, and when families started to, Lubavitcher started to have many more children, because in the early 80s, 82 or 83, I think, he spoke about not family planning. And so Lubavitchers started to have as many children as God gives them. And so there was a whole, and then the Sheva Mitzvah Bnei Noach, I told you, he spoke about gas and oil in 83 or 84. So there was a plethora of very universal and important things that he gave to the world dafka after this massive heart attack. So this isn't just a kind of, someone was sick and God saved him and God made him fine, and he goes on. We see clearly the trajectory of what he accomplished in those 15 years compared to the 15 years before, and there's no comparison. And I'll go one step further and conclude with this, that if you look at the trajectory from 1994, when Gimel Thomas, when he passed away, until today, there's no comparison. I went to the third kinnis of the Shluchim, 1985. I was there. We had maybe 80 to 100 guys. That's it. Today, there were 6,500 people at the New Jersey Convention Center this past Sunday night. Now, granted, let's say 1,000 people were balabatim. Okay. So there were 5,500 shluchim and people involved with Chabad institutions. And when I went, there was 100 max. Yes, I enjoyed it, because it was very intimate and, it's a different feeling. But so the trajectory of what was done, what happened since Gimel Tammuz until 1994 till now, it's 20, right? Or so many years later, 29 years or so, almost not going on 30. It's be'ein aroch. There's no comparison. So, Yonason, you're right. All of these things are tragic, but there is sense to this madness. There is sense to this madness. there is sense to this madness. And if in Yiddish we say the expression, Velvel, halt cup. You know what halt cup means? Halt means to hold. Cup means your head, but literally means don't lose your head. What's the expression in English? What?
Stay focused.
Stay focused. Exactly. Stay focused. There's no question. A tragedy is a tragedy. A tear is a tear. It's gefährlich. But from the I'd say stay focused. Stay focused on the goal. Chevra, have a great Shabbos, a great Chodesh. We'll see everyone on Monday. Seid gesund. Bye bye.
Thank you.
Bracha v'atzlacha. Bye bye. Chodesh.